eternal, yet ever new. His advent and His proximity, His mystical leelas and His songs, every mischief and miracle a message memorable. Every pain and travail a precept enacted. As the bud blossomed to reveal 1,000 petals, it can only be said that the fragrance of the first few years was unique.
Even in the later years, whenever we would see Swami, there was a majesty in his walk, but definitely there was a femininity in the way he would carry himself, isn't it? That grace which comes only in the feminine aspect of human beings, that would be in the way Swami would carry himself. Needless to say, when Swami was dressed up as Rishendra Mani, nobody ever doubted that it was a boy in the garb of a woman. So this district British officer who was there, he saw that this was the lady who was performing. So he went up to the stage and he said, I would like to gift a gold medal. And he said, I would myself pin it on this girl. The crooked nature, human nature is quite obvious there. But Swami was only pretending to be a woman. He was not really a woman. He was just a little boy. But he said, on the stage, I am behaving like a woman, so I will have to carry myself with what are the moral codes a woman should follow. So when this British officer came to give that medallion, Swami said, no, please give it to me in my hand, because as a woman I cannot accept you pinning it on me. Many years later, when Swami used to, in a discourse, give a beautiful Chinna Katha, he would say that there was a king who was having a royal court where he would invite a lot of artists to come and perform. So one time he invites a man who comes dressed up as a sannyasi. He comes as a sadhu, and he comes to the court and he sings verses of the scriptures about the value of vairagya, of the value of detachment, of the value of leading a life of a yogi. So the king is mighty impressed. So the king wants to offer him some gifts. So he asks for a plate full of wealth, and when he offers it to this man, he says, no, but I am a yogi. I have no need for money. So the king says, all right. So the yogi goes away. The next day the same man comes. This time he comes dressed as a dancer. He comes, he performs in front of the king. The king is again very impressed. He just gives a standing ovation. So now the man says, where is my reward? So the king says, but yesterday you refused to take a reward. So this man who acted as a sannyasi the previous day and acted as a dancer the next day, he says, yesterday I was acting the role of a sannyasi. A sannyasi has nothing to do with rewards. But today I am a dancer who dances for rewards, so I have every right to claim my rewards. So Swami would often say that, yes, definitely you are the Atman which is beyond anything, any divisions of a caste, creed, gender, or anything of that sort. But when you are playing the role of a certain being in this drama of life, it calls for you to stick to that dharma of that role.
All the World's a Stage by William Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts.
And that was precisely what Swami was showing when he acted the role of Rishendra Mani. He said, as long as I am Rishendra Mani standing on the stage, I cannot accept a male officer coming and pinning a medallion on me. But the very next day, the school had another in-house presentation and a celebration, celebrating the success of that event the previous day. Again, the head of the education board president, Ram Subramanian, she came and she said, we must honor from the school side the dancer. So the Rishendra Mani's name was called out, expecting that this dancer would come up. And from the students, Swami gets up and comes walking towards the stage. So there's people around, they tried to stop him. They said, no, they're calling for Rishendra Mani. So immediately some people who knew who was the real performer, they say, no, this boy was the one who performed yesterday. And that was when the whole school came to know that it was their own Satyam who dressed up as Rishendra Mani and did a task which was way beyond what Rishendra Mani was famous for.
We can observe this in Swami. Swami gets angry on a person and Swami is just giving him a verbal thrashing. Saying, bad boy, not good, chhi. An instant later, that man sits down, the next man gets up. Oh my God, that warmth, that love, those big eyes. Anybody would just melt into the floor. How can Swami do that? Just imagine you or me getting wild and angry on somebody. You turn and somebody else comes, and now what, you came, just sit down, wait, just calm down, just get me a glass of water, wait. Drink water, put on the fan, cool down. Yeah, what was it that you were telling? Why? Because when we feel anger, we really feel that anger on that person. But you know, the divine shows how one should be angry. Swami has no feeling, ill feeling or anger towards that person. But in order to teach that person a lesson, I am supposed to act angry. Swami is only acting angry. Swami is acting as if he is attached. Do you think that the infinite universal can be bound by a few bodies? No, that is acting, because that is necessary to teach a lesson. So that is how Swami led all his life, physical life, immersed in that truth, in his reality, at the same time being the chancellor when he has to be the chancellor, the mother when he has to be the mother, the father when he has to be the father, the strict teacher when he has to be the strict teacher. Can we imbibe that? The next thing that came was the ESLC exams. And as I said before, Swami was not permitted in that March, in that year, to sit for the exams. And then there was the supplementary ESLC exam, there was the other exam. For those who missed the exam, they can give this. And they had to go to Penukonda to write this ESLC exam. Penukonda is a good 30 kilometers away. You see that caterpillar behind? That was how they would describe one big machine called the train. They would say, it seems there is one big object which carries people. It has one eye on his forehead. It looks like one big caterpillar. This little illustration is thanks to a very active Radio SAI volunteer, Miss Isha Narayanan, who keeps doing these, who makes comics of Swami's life for Radio SAI on the website. If you have not seen it, do visit. And it's very beautiful, wonderful for children. So Ishwaramma, everybody was worried, especially Ishwaramma. Arey, Swami is going to Penukonda for the exam, how it will be, how difficult it will be. God knows what is there in Penukonda. You know, this fear for Ishwaramma, please forgive this, another little detour, was always there. In fact, when Swami had to go to Africa, Ishwaramma was very worried. She called Professor Kasturi and said, you know, please protect my son. I have heard that in Africa there are wild animals, you know, big animals, and I don't know, so please take care of my son. So Professor Kasturi, in all his, understanding, he said, Amma, you don't worry. Swami is God. Don't worry. Ishwaramma said, you be quiet. You know he is God, I know he is God. Those animals don't know that. So you please take care of him. A mother's love is a mother's love. And Ishwaramma was very worried. Swami is going. So she brought all the choicest of delicacies, murukku and other such fried savory stuff. She packed it and told him, you eat well. She was not worried about this. She never said all the best for the exam and all. Who cares about that exam? Go safe, come back safe. And this journey of 30 kilometers they had to do on a bullock cart. And as Swami would say in his discourses, they would sit in the bullock cart for 1 kilometer. See the faces of all the children there, beautifully depicted. And they would walk next to the bullock cart for 5 kilometers because it was so bumpy. We would rather chap our feet soles than break our backbone sitting in the cart. And that is how they reached Penukonda and entered their examination hall where they had to take the examination.
When new devotees used to come with Swami, Swami would tell them that you have the permission to test me. He said, test me first, test me and then accept me. So the path would be that through the process of reasoning, you enrich your faith. But the spiritual path is so beautiful that even though you take the path of reasoning to enrich your faith, the next lap of the journey is that faith should make reasoning immaterial. Now, when you launch a satellite, generally satellites have different parts, One of the main parts is a part which gives thrust to the rocket, to the satellite, because you have the Earth's gravity playing on anything which is thrown up. So when you launch a rocket, you have to give it a thrust so that it escapes the gravity of the Earth. That's why it has to give it escape velocity. But when this rocket launches, after it escapes the gravity of the Earth, that part of the engine which actually gave it its thrust, the rocket drops it. Because if it does not drop it, the whole rocket will again be pulled down to the Earth. So that which helped the rocket cross this gravity, that very thing has to be dropped if the rocket has to do its task. And that's the same thing with our spiritual journey too. Because that very reasoning, that very intellectual discrimination which has helped us to identify the right Guru, to identify God, that mental reasoning, that mental gymnastics has to be discarded after the faith has been established. And that is why when you see Swami's life, there will be a lot of episodes which reasoning cannot explain. These are incidents which God gives so that you accept them because you love the Lord. You accept them as right because you trust the Lord. You accept them without questioning because you have faith that whatever God does is right. There is no questioning. And one such episode which Swami has given us in his childhood is this episode of this ESSLC exam.
Ramesh and Paresh.
వారిద్దరు కూడా నా డెస్క్ లోపల నేను సెంటర్లో కూర్చుంటే ఒకరు ఇటువైపున ఒకరు అటువైపున కూర్చునేవాడు.
The Ramesh and Suresh would occupy one seat on either side of Bhagwan.
ఒకానొక సమయం లోపల
at one time
పబ్లిక్ ఎగ్జామినేషన్ వచ్చేసింది.
It was the time of public examination.
TSLC అని.
TSLC examination.
నేను క్లాస్ రూమ్లో అయితే అని నేను ఆన్సర్స్ చెప్పేటువంటి వాడిని.
If it would be regular classroom, Bhagwan would give answers.
ఇప్పుడు వాడు చాలా బాధపడుతున్నారు.
Both the boys classmates were feeling sad.
ఒకటి 108 వచ్చేసింది.
The register number of one student
95 వచ్చింది.
The register number another 90.
ఇంకొకటి 5 నంబర్ వచ్చింది.
Another 5.
ఒక్కో చోట కూర్చుంటున్నారు.
All of them sat at different places.
మా గతి ఏమవుతుందో అని చాలా బాధపడుతున్నారు.
Because it was examination, they were feeling very sad.
వాళ్ళకి నేను చెప్పాను,
Swami told them,
ఏమీ రాయనక్కర్లేదు,
you don't need to write any.
నేను రాస్తాను.
I will write.
మీరు ఊరికి ఒట్టి చేతులతో పెట్టినట్టుగా పెట్టి మీరు వెనక్కి రాండి అన్నాను.
You just go, keep the paper, return empty handed.
నా పేపరు నేను ఒక 10 నిమిషాల్లో ఆన్సర్ రాసేసాను.
Bhagavan completed answering whole thing in 10 minutes.
ఆ పేపర్కి అంతా కూడా 2 గంటల టైం ఇచ్చారు.
The duration maximum time is 2 hours.
ఇంకొక పేపర్ లోపల రమేష్ ఆన్సర్స్ అంతా రమేష్ హ్యాండ్ రైటింగ్ లోనే చేశారు.
Another paper Swami wrote in Ramesh handwriting the whole script.
కింద రమేష్ అని రాశాను.
At the bottom he wrote Ramesh.
ఇంకోటి పరేష్ యొక్క హ్యాండ్ రైటింగ్ కింద ఇంకొక ఆన్సర్ రాశాను.
Another script in the handwriting of Paresh, he wrote the whole thing.
అతని నేమ్ అతని సిగ్నేచర్ కూడా నేనే చేశాను.
And he also scribbled his signature.
ఆనాటి పరిస్థితుల లోపల
in those days,
ఎగ్జామినేషన్ అయిన తక్షణమే రెండవ దినమే రిజల్ట్స్ చెప్పేటువంటిది.
In those days the results were announced on the following day of the examination.
ఈ ఢిల్లీనో హైదరాబాదు ఎక్కడో పోనక్కర్లేదు అవి.
The scripts are not sent to long distances like Delhi and Hyderabad.
వచ్చింది రిజల్ట్స్ వచ్చింది.
Results are announced.
మా ముగ్గురమే ఫస్ట్ వచ్చేసినాయి.
All the 3 stood first in the examination.
ఇక్కడ అందరికీ ఒక పెద్ద కన్ఫ్యూజన్ వచ్చేసేసింది.
All are confused at this moment.
ఇదేమైనా చూచి రాశారా అనుకోవడానికి ఒకరిది 100, ఒకరిది 96, ఇంకొకరిది 8, ఈ రకంగా నంబర్స్ వేరువేరుగా ఉంటున్నాయి.
They cannot conclude that they copied because one is in one corner, other is another corner, one is in the middle.
మాత్రం ఎట్లా అవుతుంది? వీలు కాదు.
It is impossible to copy.
వారి సిగ్నేచర్ కూడా ఉంటుండాలి.
And they could also find the signature.
ఈ విధంగా పెట్టి ఆ ఉరవకొండ లోపల పబ్లిక్ రోడ్ లోపల మమ్మల్ని ముగ్గురిని ఎత్తుకొని ప్రొసెషన్ చేశారు.
And all the three were lifted in the arms of the local inhabitants there in Uravakonda. A big procession was organized on that
ఇంత సమీపంగా ఉండినటువంటి పిల్లలు వాడిద్దరు.
They were so close to Swami.
What is the need? You wonder what is the need for this Swami. Swami he could have just when he can materialize so many things, can't he materialize an article? Can't he materialize an answer paper? But that is what he did for Ramesh and Paresh. But it is not that Ramesh and Paresh were any ordinary people. Now, it takes a lot of faith, I remember somebody having said that you put chits in front of Swami, Swami will give the correct answer. Swami will give the correct answer, but do I have the courage to follow it? One of my classmates, I remember when all of us were eagerly awaiting to get to know when Swami is going to Kodaikanal. Are we on the trip to Kodaikanal? If we are not there, we have to go home. If we are there, it's great bliss. Swami left, many of us were left behind. Exactly on that day, 2 hours later, was this boy's train ticket to his home. I said, you are very lucky, man, because your train ticket so perfectly, you didn't miss even one darshan. And just as Swami has left, 2 hours later, you will also leave. How did you get the idea to book exactly this day? He said, Swami said. Swami said? When? I never had seen Swami speak to this boy. So I said, when did Swami tell you? He said, no, I put chits. Oh, okay. How did you put chits? No, I knew Swami would leave in April. So April 1st to April 30th, I put 30 chits. I picked up this date came and I booked. Oh my God. We get doubts when we put 3 chits. 30 chits. That kind of faith gives that kind of experience. And it is not as if Ramesh and Paresh were ordinary. If we see how they led their life and their ultimate death also, you realize that they were indeed great devotees of the Lord.
వారికి కూడాను 12, 14 సంవత్సరములు.
They were aged 12 and 14.
నేను ఉరవకొండ వదిలాను.
Swami left Uravakonda.
ఆ పరేష్ అనేటువంటి వాడు రాజు 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 అని ఓ పిచ్చి పట్టిపోయింది.
The Paresh, the classmate, turned mad because of the pangs of separation.
ఈ రమేష్ అనేవాడు వెళ్ళినాడు, ఒక బావిలో పడిపోయాడు.
Ramesh, another classmate, fell into the well.
బావిలో పడి ప్రాణం విడిచాడు.
He fell into the well and died.
రాజు నేను స్కూల్కి రాను.
I don't attend the school without Razu.
ఈ పిల్లవాడు అంతే రాజు 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 అని ఒకే పిచ్చి పట్టిపోయింది.
The other classmate went on repeating Razu's name.
ఆసుపత్రిలో చేర్చినారు, ఎక్కడే కానీ పిచ్చి నయం కాలేదు.
He was given treatment in many of the hospitals.
వాళ్ళ తల్లి తండ్రులు ఇద్దరు వచ్చేసేసి నన్ను కోరారు, మీ ముఖం చూస్తేనన్నా వాడికి ఆనందం వేస్తుందేమో, రండి ఒక తోరి అని.
The parents came and prayed to Swami. At least the son would be all right if he sees the face of Swami.
నేను బళ్ళారి పిచ్చి ఆసుపత్రికి నన్ను తీసుకెళ్లారు.
And they took Bhagavan to the mental hospital in Ballari.
అక్కడే పోతాను రాజు 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 అని అర్చినాడు, ఏడ్చినాడు, పాదాల పైన పడ్డాడు, ప్రాణం విడిచాడు.
Seeing Swami, he shouted Razu, 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 fell at the feet of Swami and died there.
ఆ విధంగా స్వామికి అర్పితం చేశారు.
That's how they have surrendered themselves.
మేము ఎప్పుడు మీతోనే ఉండాలి.
We should always be with you.
మిమ్మల్ని వదిలి క్షణమైనా మేము ఉండలేము.
We cannot live away from you for a
అని
moment.
కోరేటువంటి వారు.
That was their prayer.
తర్వాత నేను
Later,
ఇక్కడికి పుట్టపర్తికి వచ్చిన తర్వాత
when Swami came here,
సుబ్బమ్మ 1 ఎకరా ల్యాండ్ ఇచ్చింది సత్యమ్మ గుడి దగ్గర.
Subbamma gave 1 acre of land near that Satyamma temple.
దానికి ఒక చిన్న ఇల్లు కట్టారు.
A small house was constructed.
అప్పట్లోపల వీళ్ళిద్దరు కూడాను 2 కుక్క పిల్లలై నా దగ్గర వచ్చారు.
At that time, these 2 classmates came to Bhagavan in the form of two little small dogs, puppies.
దీనికి మైసూరు మహారాజా చెల్లెలినటువంటి ఆమె.
There was the sister of Mysore Maharaja.
ఆమె ఈ 2 చాలా అందంగా ఉంటున్నాయి, జాక్ అండ్ జిల్ అని పెట్టింది.
These 2 puppies, 2 small dogs, are named Jack and Jill.
జాక్ అండ్ జిల్, జాక్ అండ్ జిల్, జాక్ అండ్ జిల్ అని చెప్తూ వచ్చేటుంటాడు.
And everyone called these two dogs Jack and Jill.
మైసూర్ డివిజన్ రాణి,
Mysore division,
పెద్ద రాణి,
the queen,
ఆమె చాలా మడుగు,
and she has got all.
ఎప్పుడు చూసినా పూజ చేసేటువంటిది.
She's a great devotee who
పూజ
worships.
చేయాలంటే చెట్టుకంతా ముందు నీళ్ళంతా కొట్టాలి.
First of all, the whole area should be sanctified
ఆ
by
నీళ్లు కొట్టిన
sprinkling
తర్వాత తిరిగి
water,
పాలు కొట్టాలి.
and then milk has to be sprinkled
ఆ
around,
పాలు కొట్టిన తర్వాత ఆమె చేతులతో ముట్టి పుష్పాలు కోయాలి.
and she has to personally pluck out the flowers,
ఆ పుష్పాలతో పూజ చేసేటువంటిది.
and with those flowers personally picked up are used for worship.
అలాంటి ఆమె
Such lady
స్వామిని చూడాలని కర్ణాటకపల్లి వరకు కారులో వచ్చింది.
came to see Swami in by
అప్పుడు
car.
పుట్టపర్తికి
Karnataka.
ఎక్కడే కానీ రోడ్డు లేదు.
There was no approach road to Puttaparthi.
అక్కడ నుంచి వచ్చింది.
She came from there.
పాత మందిరం అనగా ఇప్పుడు ఓల్డ్ కళ్యాణ మంటపం కట్టారే, అక్కడ పూర్వం చాలా చిన్న షెడ్ ఉండేటువంటిది.
Pata Mandir, the presently Kalyana Mandapam, in those days there was a small shed.
ఆమె వచ్చింది,
She came,
స్వామికి నమస్కారం చేసుకుంది,
she did namaskar to Swami,
వెళ్ళిపోవాలని ఉంటుంది.
and she decided she
నేను
wanted to
చెప్పాను,
go.
కొంచెం ఒక దినం రాత్రి ఉండండి, ఈ డ్రైవర్ పోవాలి కదా, అక్కడ కార్ రిపేర్ చేయాలి కదా అని అన్నీ చెప్పాను.
Swami said, you stay here tonight because you cannot go. The driver has to go up to Karnataka Palli.
ఇక్కడ
Stay here.
చాకల సుబ్బన్న అని ఒక చాలా నమ్మకమైనటువంటి వర్షి.
There is a very faithful man here in Puttaparthi,
స్వామి అంటే చాలా ప్రాణము.
Sakala Subbanna, who considers Swami as his life.
పొద్దున సాయంకాలము పాత మందిరాన్ని చక్కగా చూసుకునేటువంటి వాడు.
Day and night he served Swami there in Pata Mandir.
భోజనం చేసి డ్రైవరు కర్ణాటకపల్లికి పోతున్నాడు.
The driver, after taking his food, proceeded to Karnataka Palli.
నేను జాక్కు చెప్పాను, జాక్ చూడు మన మనిషి పోతున్నాడు, అతని వెంట నీవు పో అన్నాను.
Swami told the Jack, this man is going, follow him.
అప్పుడు జాక్ అతని వెంట పోయింది.
Jack, the dog, followed the driver.
రాత్రంతా కూడాను కారు కింద పండుకుంది.
The Jack, the dog, slept there under the car.
తిరిగి తెల్లవారు లేస్తానే రాణి గారి వెళ్ళాలి కదా, కానీ కారు స్టార్ట్ చేయడానికి ప్రయత్నం చేశాడు.
Next morning, Queen was to leave. The driver was starting the engine.
స్టార్ట్ చేసి కొంత దూరం కదిలించారు కారును.
He started the engine and the car started to
ఆ
move.
కారు టైర్ కింద పండుకుంది ఈ జాక్.
This Jack was lying under the tire of the car.
కడుపు పైన పోయింది టైర్.
The tire rolled on the stomach of the
ఈ
car.
బ్యాక్ బోన్ అంతా విరిగిపోయింది.
The backbone was broken down.
అక్కడి నుంచి అరుచుకుంటూ దాన్ని ఈడ్చుకొని వస్తుండే అది పాపం.
This Jack the dog was shouting, crying, dragging its body all along to Puttaparthi.
అప్పుడు సుబ్బన్న వచ్చి, స్వామి జాక్ చాలా బాధపడుతుండది, ఏమో ప్రమాదం జరిగింది అని వచ్చినాడు.
Then Subbanna came hurriedly. Swami, Jack is crying. It is feeling so sad. Some danger is there.
నేను బయటికి వచ్చాను.
Swami came out.
ఏడ్చుకుంటూ వస్తున్నది.
The Jack was coming, crying and crying.
వచ్చి స్వామి పాదాల పైన పడింది, ప్రాణమిడిచింది.
The Jack crying fell at the feet of Bhagavan and died there.
ఆ జాక్ను వెనకలు పెట్టినటువంటి బృందావనము జాక్ యొక్క సమాధియే.
Today you find there in Vrindavan the tomb of this Jack.
అది సెంటర్లో కట్టలేదు.
It was not the center.
నేను చెప్పాను ఇంకా కొంచెం సైడ్ కట్టమని చెప్పాను.
Swami said it should be built by the side.
దీనికి రెండవ సమాధి కూడా కావాలి అన్నాను నేను.
The second samadhi is also required, tomb.
సరే, కొన్ని దినములు అయిన తర్వాత
After
ఈ
few
జాక్
days.
పోయింది అనేటువంటి దీంతో అన్నం తినకుండా ఒకే ఏడ్చుకుంటూ ఆ జిల్లి కూడా ప్రాణం విడిచింది.
Because of separation, the other dog Jill cried and died.
ఆ రెండింటి యొక్క సమాధియే పాత మందిరం దగ్గర వెనక ఉండేటువంటి బృందావనము.
That's what we find Vrindavanam behind this Pathamandir, the two tombs of the Jack and
ఆ
Jill.
విధంగా రమేష్ పరేష్ వాళ్ళు స్వామి వెంట ఉండాలని ఇంత తపస్సు చేసి ఇన్ని విధాల జన్మమైన ఎత్తేసి కుక్క జన్మమైన ఎత్తి ప్రశాంతనంలో అక్కడ నిలిచిపోయారు.
That was the prayer, the penance of Ramesh and Paresh, who wanted to stay with Swami even in the form of dogs.
Dear brothers and sisters, as Alexander said, all the wealth, all the fame, the fortune, whatever we earn in our life, nothing will carry. He wanted him to be buried with his hands spread across, a coffin to be made with 2 holes through which his hands would come out, to show the world that the great Alexander who conquered the world leaves the world without anything. But every little drop of God's love that we win in this world will stay with us through life, through lifetimes, irrespective of what birth we take. Love for God, our love for God and His love for us never reduces. And that is so easily seen in the life of Ramesh and Paresh, the blessed Jack and Jill.
In the Bukkapatnam days and in the earlier days, we all know the famous Kalpavriksha tree. We've all heard of the stories where Swami would bring out objects from an empty bag. These were all things which Swami was doing even in those days, but he would tell those boys who were witnessing all this that if you were to reveal this to any of your friends or families, I would stop doing this. So though Swami was doing many of these things, Swami ensured that it was kept a very well-guarded secret. But in spite of that, there were times when Swami would reveal what or who he really was. Swami's elder sister, Venkama Garu, she was building a house in Puttaparthi. And in those days when you have to build a house, you have to really begin from scratch. You have to start by making the bricks. So she and her family starts gathering this clay and starts making bricks. And the bricks are laid out and they are there to be dried. But when those bricks are laid out to dry, on one particular day, there is a very large storm which is beginning to form. So the moment they see this, the entire family gets very panicky, because if it were to rain, months and weeks of work which had gone in to make those bricks would all be wasted away. So they're all wondering frantically, how do we save these bricks? So someone suggests to Venkama that, why don't you go to the other side of Chitravati, go to Bukkapatnam and fetch some dry sugarcane leaves. We can cover these bricks, and even if there's a rain, at least most of the bricks can be saved. So then begins an expedition. The whole family runs out in search of dry sugarcane leaves. And Swami, being the young active member of the family, he also runs. But even as they're crossing the Chitravati bed, Swami suddenly stops, looks up at the skies, and in a voice which was resounding with a kind of command, Swami said, Venkama, Vana Radu. He says, Venkama, it will not rain. That confidence and that power with which Swami said it stunned everybody who was there. And by then the clouds were thick above their heads. What does he mean by saying that it won't rain? And needless to say, it did not rain. And it reminds us of the many times when Swami did this in the later years. When we were talking to one of the old students, he described a very beautiful incident when one day when they were sitting for darshan, it was a very rainy day. Those days the Kulwant hall did not have a roof, it was sands around the mandir. And when it started pouring rain, all these devotees used to go and sit under the small arches which used to be there around the compound walls. Swami came out and started talking to the boys, and he said, see these devotees, Anta pichi, Swami said. And I tell them, they don't listen to me. Suddenly a mischievous twinkle in Swami's eye. And that Swami said, boys, are you ready to see one tamasha? So immediately all backs straightened up, all ears were trying to pick up what Swami was there to say. Then Swami said, I am going to go out to give darshan now. The moment I step out of this platform, the portico, the rain will stop. And then I'll go give darshan to everybody, and I'll come back. The moment I step back into the portico, it'll again start raining. Are you ready? Are you ready to see? And all boys said, yes, Swami, yes, Swami. Ever so gently, Swami just in slow motion put out one leg out, and the moment he stepped out, as though someone just closed the tap, the rain stopped. And Swami looked back and Swami said, how is it? So all boys were very happy. Then Swami went out for the darshan, and Swami went very slowly. It took almost half an hour. And when Swami came back after that complete round, he came near the portico, he looked at the boys and said, boys, ready? And immediately they remembered, oh, Swami had told that it will start raining. And as though Swami just jumped onto the portico, he did not step onto it. He jumped onto the portico. In the moment he jumped onto it, as though somebody had just started the shower, started raining again. And Swami said, see, chusara. And this little Satyam, this was probably the first time when Swami showed his control over the elements. The second time when it happened was when Swami's hut was set on fire and we had that one cloud coming and putting it off.